And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
By now, it's widely accepted by anybody who likes fun games, okay, at least by me, that Memoir 44 is the definitive World War II game. Well, anyway, this is the latest expansion, the Sword of Stalingrad, and it comes with two large Overlord scenarios, a couple scenarios for the regular game, but it also comes with a deck of cards. These are called combat cards, and these are used mostly for street fighting. The rules of the game allow them to be used in any scenario that allows for these cards. It will say combat rules are in effect, which is basically the four scenarios that are in here. Although, as far as I can tell, you can use them with any scenario that you think that would work that has street fighting or so on. Now, this is going to be featuring the Eastern Front, this scenario. And these combat cards are really interesting. Let's take a closer look at them. Now, on the surface, a combat card looks like any other. It has a different backing to it, but if you look at it, it looks actually like a regular command card. The way combat cards work is that each player gets one of them at the beginning of the scenario, and they can play them along with another card. So say, for example, this one here says that the players a spare sandbag in one ordered unit's hex after the unit has moved and battled. So you can attack with a unit and play this card and put a sandbag in one of the spots. Or this one here is played on an enemy's turn, and it tells you at the bottom of the card to do that. And when an enemy unit, they run out of ammo and they have to fall back to a baseline hex in the same section of the battlefield. It can be really critical. And these are all just really interesting cards that you'll find as the game goes by. Like this one here. Up to 3 ordered armor units may ignore terrain movement restrictions this turn. So you're playing this with another card. A lot of these cards also, at the top of them, have this symbol here, and it says street fighting. And any card that has that street fighting symbol at the top, you can play it as a street fighting command. So instead of playing whatever it says on that card, instead you can simply just pick one of the ordered units to close assault with an extra die. Not the greatest thing in the world, but certainly very useful and helpful. And so these cards are used in that regard. So how do you get more of them? Well, you get an extra one of these cards whenever you play a recon command card. You know those recon command cards that everybody hates because it only lets you attack with one unit in one of the 3 sections? Well, here, now people are going to be playing them deliberately just to get more of these combat cards. This is a really neat addition to the game. It really balances the deck out, and if I can fit these into a scenario, I will. But, I don't think you're here to see these cards as much as you are to see the Overlord scenarios. So let's take a look at them. So here's one of the battles, Sword of Stalingrad. And you can see how this battle, when I look at all the terrain that I would have had to set up, had the map not been pre-printed, this would have driven me absolutely crazy. But this is an amazingly fun battle. One of the reasons is because you need 17 medals to win this battle, and if you can see the massive amounts of forces that are there, this is really going to be a bloodbath. When you look at the German forces that are aligned, there's quite a few tanks, and lots of the soldiers who are there. I didn't put out the medals, but there's plenty of those, and there's 4 artillery units, just a big amount of tanks on the side, and all that's going to be hitting the soldiers here who are really heavily defended. And this is one of those cases where you look at it initially and you think, man, the Russians have such a huge advantage. But because of the commissary rules, the rules where the Russian overlord has to play his cards a turn in advance, that gives the Russians a big disadvantage. And this is a scenario that makes great use of the new cards. The combat cards really come into play here. This is a bloody battle, but it certainly is a lot of fun. The other side of the Overload map, it has even more terrain. In fact, there's very few spots on this board that have clear terrain at all, and it's another very, very bloody battle. Both these battles are very similar in that regard. This one has a few fewer units, but actually requires 18 medals to win. Although, just like the other side, there's also several spots of points where you can get medals by holding them. This side even has more than the other side. And you can see this side has a incursion by the Germans coming up on the one flank. And so there's going to be combat on the very first turn, and the Germans have a much better position this turn, starting in cities. However, the Russians still have a great position. There's a lot of fighting, and there's a lot of different ways to move around the board. This is a very, very tactical battle, and again, very bloody for both sides. The Russians still hindered by those Commissar rules. The Germans still have a little bit of a benefit from the Blitz rules. And again, the different cards come into play, the combat cards, and it really does a good job at showing the city warfare that happened during this time period. There's two other scenarios, regular scenarios, and a sheet comes for them, and I'm not going to set these scenarios up for you, but they're also the Soviets fighting the Germans amongst the streets, and these, you're going to have to set up quite a bit of terrain, but they also use the combat cards like we mentioned earlier. And then there's a smattering of other cards, the special cards that came in the air pack, that update some of the rules that have been introduced in some of the expansions since then. I'm kind of surprised that they're in this set and not in the expansions that they were introduced in, well, at least like the British forces, but hey, I'm glad to have them. Obviously, this expansion is for die-hard Memoir fans. For it to have the full glory, you obviously want to have the Eastern Front expansion pack, and if you're like me, you want to have two so that you don't have to use extra units, because you will be putting out in one scenario every single Russian infantry unit from 2 packs, and you'll be putting out quite a bit of the Germans also. And the Overlord expansion also will help this too. So this is kind of like a step built upon other steps. But so far I've enjoyed these packets, but this one is by far my favorite. And I like the last one with the Tiger tanks. But this street fighting, I'm telling you, these are some really exciting battles, because there's just units getting blown to pieces all over the place. And I'm not trying to glorify death or anything, but it seems like there's much more action happening in these. And this is really fun. So if you like Memoir 44, pick this up.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.